Hello everyone, welcome back to the Christ MotoGP Podcast. Round 3, Texas. What are we expecting this week? Well, if it goes to script, Marc Marquez will win both races, but we hope we're going to get something different. Not for the sake of the sport, just for entertainment purposes. Joining me, Jordan Moreland, is Lewis Duncan and Pete McLaren. Lewis, Texas. It goes without saying, Marc Marquez has been very good around here. Hasn't won since 2021, however. There's been Enea Bastianini won since, Alex Rins, Marc Vinales last year in the Aprilia. Of course, the last non-Ducati GP win came at COTA last year, which is, I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. Obviously a bad thing if you're other manufacturers, but I think the consensus is there's going to be a clear favourite heading into this weekend, and it's a certain 93. Isn't that fair to say?
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, if you look at last year's race, Mark was kind of on the pace there to win that one on the GP23, but he had those brake issues. So I think, I think people may be looking at the last couple of years being like, oh, well, Mark hasn't won there for a few years, but, you think back to 2021 when we turned up there in October and he won that race, with one arm essentially, 22, he wasn't there because of injury. No,
he was there in 22.
Was he there in 22?
He had the bad start.
Yes, I should remember that because I was at that race, yeah. Yes, now that you mentioned it, yeah, I remember that actually, again, when he had that bad start, he had the pace there to kind of win that race, and I think he said at the time, we managed to get, did he get up to 6th or something like that?
That's right.
Yeah, I was there and I forgot about that. How long ago it was. So yeah, you kind of look, even at those kind of years where maybe Mark's not been at 100%, he's still really been the favourite to win those races at COTA. Now that he is at 100%, the bike's the best bike he's probably ever had. It's just a circuit that's made for him. But let's not look beyond Alex Marquez, because there was one very crucial thing that Marc Marquez spoke about in Argentina, was that at turn 6, the left-hander, Alex Marquez was faster than him, and Marc actually kind of got the hump a little bit about that, because he couldn't figure out just how. He said it's not possible he's quicker through these left-hand corners than I am. So maybe there's something there, that maybe just, a little secret weapon that Alex has figured out, in those corners on that bike, that maybe he can try and exploit this weekend. But yeah, Marquez's record here is undeniable. Seven wins. He is almost, I think if you look back over his entire career, he must have like a 90% win record in the United States. It's an insane
He
tally.
went through a period, I think, from 2012, because he used to race obviously Indianapolis, and then COTA came along. Obviously you had Laguna Seca, and then you had the doubles of Indy and COTA. I think he won every race he did until 2019
when he crashed out the lead.
Crashed out the lead. So what does that tell you?
Well, that covers all classes as well, and multiple different types of track. And there's just, obviously all these American circuits are all anti-clockwise, which is kind of the thing that suits Mark the most. So yeah, you go into COTA, and we've had this one circled in the calendar for a long time, haven't we? Pretty much since November last year. Marc Marquez is going to win this weekend, and I don't see anything changing there.
Pete, what do you think? Even if you look outside of Mark, who can be his likeliest challenger? Is it going to be his brother, annoying him again with the performances that he's put up this year?
It is a place where you get a few surprises, isn't it? As you say, even Mark falling from the lead a couple of times and whatever else. So, Alex is. I think that's a big question mark, isn't it? Can Alex get closer? Can he threaten him? Can he sort of keep this momentum going? I think, as you say, Aprilia getting that GP win last year. I think, if I was an Aprilia rider, I'd want one of my bikes with Vinales' setup just to try for this weekend. You know what I mean? You'd want to just see, wouldn't you? Can the magic sort of carry on over? Because what a weekend that wasn't it, for Vinales on the Aprilia? So who knows? Obviously the bike has changed. They've updated all parts of the RSGP, but still, given how fantastic it was, I think, if it happened to work, whatever it is that caused that sort of magic weekend last year, if they can carry that over, Bears, Agura, who knows? Could make an upset. Let's see. As you say, Rins, we've had surprises with Honda. Zarco's doing well on the Honda, but I think it's going to be a tough ask, isn't it, along that back straight? It's not the sort of place where you want to be struggling for sort of top speed or straight line performance. So, yeah, it's Marc's to lose, I think, isn't it? But it is a place where you get a few surprises. So, I think, going right back to Jorge Lorenzo and that jump start. What was that, in about 2014? I mean, that was one of the ones that jumps out as well. So, things happen there. Marc's had problems at the start, as Lewis has mentioned. He's fallen from the lead. We've seen Pecco's fallen from the lead, hasn't he? 23. So it's the sort of place where you could be having a great weekend until you're not, and vice versa. We saw last year that Maverick having a great weekend looked like it had all gone wrong in those early laps. The start, the chaos, still comes through and wins. The only Aprilia wins. So. Yeah, let's hope we get some more surprises, I think, anyway, if nothing else. But certainly, I think Marc Marquez is to lose, isn't it, really?
Yeah, no, as just mentioned, it's a good circuit for a bit of drama, actually, because even if you go back to practice sessions and qualifying sessions, I think that Marc Marquez quali lap where the bike cut out on the main straight and he jumped the wall and ran down pit lane and he got back on the bike with literally, I think he timed it so there was, enough for one lap, and he went and done the lap record, I think it was 2015, on his spare bike. I mean... Yeah, Valentino Rossi's had ups and downs here. I always remember him crashing out in 2016 and him and Alex Rins battling for the win in 19 when Marc crashed out. Even last year, as you say, there was chaos at the start. Marc and Jorge Martin had contact. There was wings flying everywhere. Costa was sending moves everywhere. It was a really good race last year. And the only thing I will say is that after that weekend, Maverick Vinales didn't know how he won that weekend on that Aprilia, and I think it summed it up for me. He had no idea how he had those great rounds at Portimao and COTA. I do hope that Aprilia can continue something like it shown last year, because, I mean, Ayagura as a rookie must be thinking, well, if it won here last year, could you try and get a good result? Because I think there's a potential there for sure. Bezzecchi, hard to say. It's a circuit that he's been okay at in the past, but I'm more looking at the Hondas, as you mentioned, Pete. Can they try to get towards the podium fight? I mean, Zarco was very close in Argentina. I do think this circuit does suit them, apart from one bit, as you say. That big back straight is just going to kill them, I think, with the other bikes. I think if they can get something hooked up in the tight and twisty bits, who knows, we could see a Honda surprise at the front. But yeah, first point I want to mention, really, Lewis, Pecco Bagnaia, there's been a lot of talk about his start to the season. I don't think it's been that bad, to be honest. In terms of an expectation, of course he wants to be winning pretty much every race, every rider does. But you look at it on paper, it's not that bad, is it? It's just that his teammates been absolutely head and shoulders above him at the minute. I think there's something for him to ponder, because there's been comments about the GP24 and potentially that he might switch back to it. What do you make of those comments? Do you think it's too early to judge? Because it's only third round.
Yeah, I think it is a bit early. I think if it's almost Pecco admitting defeat there, that he can't ride this 2025 bike, which in theory isn't very different to the 2024 bike. So, yeah, I think we've seen this before with Pecco, where he gets a bit, when things don't quite go his way, he gets a bit lost in his head. I mean, you think back to COTA a couple of years ago when he crashed out the lead, and he blamed it initially on the bike having too much stability on the front end, so he couldn't, he couldn't feel the limit, and he walked back those comments. We've had that a few times over the year. Think back to the invisible visor tear off in Misano in 2020 when he crashed out the lead. There's always been those things, and I think Pecco's sort of attitude has tended to default towards blame something else instead of kind of just sort of hold a bit of accountability for himself. Clearly there's something in the setup of the bike that isn't quite working for him yet, and I think Ducati have said as such, and they aren't kind of throwing him to the wolves yet, but they are also saying, if you listen to Gigi, if you listen to Davide Tardozzi, we don't really know what it is. We think there's something wrong, but we can't really say for certain that there is, and I think that's the telling point, especially when you look at the dominance of Marc on that bike, and the fact that then even Alex Marquez is faster than Pecco Bagnaia. There is, on paper the results aren't terrible, but I mean, you're looking, he's 5.5 seconds off his teammate in Argentina. Had Marc not had to drop out of the lead in Thailand to boost his tyre pressures, that average pace was going to be working out at Pecco, almost losing by nearly 10 seconds. There is a problem there, and we're gonna sort of start getting to the point, I think, where we're gonna see, whether it's this weekend, whether it's next weekend, that the problem's a rider right now rather than the bike. We've seen Pecco when things aren't quite right. He's still able to come through. We've seen that. A lot of times in the past couple of years, Fridays haven't started off well, but then he comes back through, and even by Sunday, he's back to his best, and we haven't seen that. And you do have to start looking at it in the context of, okay, what's going on with the other Ducatis? None of them are having problems. Even someone like Di Giannantonio is not saying the same comments as Pecco, and he had no preseason, and he wasn't that far off beating Pecco in Argentina. There's only so much you can start to blame the bike, and I think already that's too much. I think saying, oh, well, maybe I need to go back to the GP24. It's like, well, Alex Marquez isn't riding the way he's riding just because he's on the GP24. If it was just the GP24, Morbidelli would be, right on his... Exactly, yeah. You'd be right there as well. I think that slightly belies the fact that, Alex has now got a bike that he's comfortable with, and he's able to really, really shine with his talent. Pecco Bagnaia is a double world champion. We're not saying he's not a talented rider, so he should really be, whatever problems he thinks he's having, or, is having, he needs to be riding around them. That's what the best riders do. No bike is ever perfect. And, if you're it's good that he's banking the points. He's not crashed yet, which is the first time, I think, maybe ever in his MotoGP career. He hasn't thrown out the scenery yet in the stage of the season. But, yeah, he needs to stop looking for excuses and stop looking for, there's a problem here, and start riding the bike and start adapting to the bike and start being the Pecco Bagnaia that he should be. This is a great rider. We know that. This is statistically Ducati's best rider ever. A rider that proved last year he can take it to Marc Marquez. Proved on multiple occasions he can take it to Marc Marquez in a head-to-head fight and come out on top. Oh, I know there are some caveats to throw in there. Jerez, for example, Marc was on an older bike, and we now know how old that bike was. And you think back to like Aragon a couple of years ago, obviously Marc wasn't fully fit. But, we know what Pecco is capable of, and I think he now needs to, Ducati needs to step down and go, look, whether you're comfortable or not in this bike, this is the bike you've got, we'll try our best, but you've got to ride it. You've got to ride it, and that's it. And I think this is what we need to see this weekend, is he's got to go out there and ride the bike and adapt to the bike. And if he's not comfortable with it, then tough, he has to push beyond that.
Yeah. Pete, what's your take on it? The comments about the 24, it would be I think, whether he's saying it just in the heat of the moment, or if it wouldn't be a good move, I think, for me, because you want to be on the same spec as your teammate. You want to be having the latest parts that he gets. You want to be that parity. You want to have that. It's what do you think heading into this weekend for him would be a achievable or good result? Do you think it's just 2 podiums again?
I think, first of all, it's a sign of frustration, isn't it? A little bit. I think when you're saying comments like that, I think it is frustration at seeing your teammate ahead of you and another guy on the 24 bike, as you guys have just said. I think this weekend will be interesting because it will be a direct comparison, or we can make a direct comparison to last year, can't we? The 2 rounds so far. Obviously, Turbis wasn't on the calendar last year. Thailand was in a completely different place on the calendar. It was a wet Grand Prix. So all we've really had is the Buriram Sprint, if you like, to compare, haven't we, this year and last, even though different times of the year. This will be same track, similar time of year. And what is the performance like? Is Pecco, how is he compared to what he did last year on the standard GP24? So I think there will be some more answers this weekend that we maybe haven't had so far. And that, because it is a surprise, isn't it? Everyone expected he was going to face a really tough battle, to put it mildly, against Marc. People didn't expect he'd also have Alex ahead of him in pretty much every session as well, isn't it? This is not just an every now and then thing. It's, Pecco hasn't really been able to establish himself as best of the rest behind Marc yet. And I think that's the first thing he's got to do this weekend, is to try and break up that Marquez brothers dominance, isn't it? Try and get amongst them, try and build some confidence there. Because as you guys said, when other people are going faster than you on the same bike, whether it's the same brand or exactly the same bike in the case of his teammate and presumably Digia on the GP25, should we say, it's very difficult then, isn't it? Because if you're a team and you're a manufacturer, whichever manufacturer it is, you're looking at and saying, well, look, this other guy's doing more with the same package. So you can do this. You're a talented guy. And I think there's pressure on Pecco to deliver that, to get up there and show that he can, take the fight, if not to Marc, on days when we're talking about COTA, obviously, we know that Marc, a bit like Sachsenring, isn't it? He always has something special there. Okay, but on those days, there's no reason not to expect Pecco to be best of the rest, is there? But we haven't seen that this year, and that's been one of the big surprises. So whatever it is that they've changed, and that's the surprising thing as well, isn't it, is not much seems to have changed, and yet Pecco seems to have lost relative performance. So what is it that's gone on there? He's hinting, as Lewis has said, that something that has been changed on the bike, the engine, the chassis, the aero is apparently the same, but there are still other things that could be different, isn't suiting him. So, okay, let's see, maybe go back to something like the GP24. But all the time he's doing that, Marc is refining what he's got. He's happy with what he's got, and he's moving things further and further ahead, I think. I personally expected that sticking with the GP24 engine would be better for Pecco. I thought he's going to be on basically a similar package to the one that he dominated the end of last season with, wasn't it? So I didn't expect the start of the season to be this hard for him, absolutely.
Lewis?
Yeah, and you wonder at what point as well, if this this drought continues, at what point did Ducati kind of start to, maybe look at the rest test and be like, okay, maybe we, give Alex Marquez Digi's bike to have a few laps on just to see what it's like. Does he feel the same comments? Because if it's a case of he's, going from GP24 to GP20 and then saying, doing it for Digi, but maybe less so given he really Digi needs as much time on the bike as he can given his injury. You do have to wonder, did Ducati look into something like that as maybe, let's give Alex the bike to test? Does he feel the same comments? And if he doesn't, then that kind of gives you the clue. If he does, then you can go, okay, well, clearly there is something there that Marc's able to just ride around better. But even in that situation, Pecco has to ride around it too. If Marc isn't comfortable on something, but it's not bothering him, then Pecco has to get to a level where that's the same for him. That's what is expected of world champions. You can make excuse after excuse after excuse all you want. Well, Marc's an alien, Marc's an 8-time world champion, we've seen blah, 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 blah. Pecco has been regularly and consistently over the past sort of year being like, I'm ready for the challenge. He's had Valentino Rossi saying, Pecco's better than the rest of them. He can take the fight to Marc. Prove it. So you do have to wonder, is Ducati gonna, if they start to kind of, because they will quickly start to run out of patience. With Pecco, they see. Ducati wants a clean sweep of championships. They want the manufacturers' championship, they want the riders' championship, they want the teams' championship, but they want to be doing that 1-2 with their factory riders.
Yep.
They've got Pecco locked into next year. I'm not saying they're going to start getting cold feet on him, but they will then have to start thinking come later in the year, if this doesn't iron itself out, if they can't figure out what the problem is, or if he can't figure out what his problem is, you're going to be looking at, okay, well, what do we do for the future? Because clearly we're going to be keeping Marc here if he wants to stay, and then if someone like Alex Marquez keeps doing what he's doing, do you then think, well, we want 1-2s, that's the lineup doing 1-2s at the moment, maybe that's the direction we go in. So there will come a point as well where this Pecco's future does get called into question as a factory team Ducati rider if this doesn't work itself out, or I say work itself out, he needs to work it out. This isn't a case, something won't change and then this isn't going to be just something will click. He has to figure it out. I think that's clear now. But yeah, you do wonder if Ducati will have to sort of use the test and think, okay, well, if we can't figure out and he's not going quicker, do we give Alex the bike just to see what his comments are? And if he goes, oh yeah, the bike's great, in fact, it's even better here than it is, than the old bike, then they've got their answer as to what the real issue is. But I think already it's obvious what the real issue is, and it's the rider, and it's the mindset. He's gone up against Marc. He's expected to be a challenger, and it's not happened. And you do have to wonder as well how much of this is Pecco not willing to push because he doesn't want any DNFs like last year. That's been a big criticism. He had 8 DNFs last year, or 8 non-scores, and that lost him the championship. And everyone said, well, you look at Marc's consistency when he, in his last championship year, how much of that is Pecco not willing to push because he's too worried about crashing? Unfortunately, when you get into a situation where you're 30 points down on your championship rival already, you're going to be forced to start pushing. And when you're forced into that situation, that's when the mistakes come. So he's left himself also no real kind of leeway to kind of make those mistakes without there being such big consequences. Now, every mistake he makes, so long as Marc does what he does, is going to be even more magnified. So he's really backed himself into a corner.
Yeah, I agree with both of you said. I think I just want to see him fighting at the front because he's capable of it. Like, it doesn't just disappear, does it? Like, that sort of thing. You know, if you can take it to, as you've seen the past few years, I want to see the two redbacks fighting each other. I haven't seen that. No disrespect to Bastianini. I mean, hot and cold every weekend, and that point you make about having a 1-2 in the World Championship, Lewis, something Ducati haven't done yet. Am I right in saying that? Yeah, I don't think they've ever done it, and it would be something to tick off the box, because that's something that, like, Repsol Honda did for years. Yamaha did it with Lorenzo and Rossi. They want to have that next thing. They can go, look, we're the best. We've got the best two riders on the grid and the best bike. And I think with Bagnaia this weekend, he needs to just kind of remove that block. I think maybe the DNF point is really good. You know, he said it in the preseason that he had a lot of thinking over the winter, and he thought about the DNFs a lot, even on honeymoon. I think he said he thought about them, and it's like, well, is he being too cautious now? And he knows his feeling isn't 100%, and he's then just not willing to take that extra 2% step. And if he gets circuits that he does like, and it does click, fair play to him, because he's playing the long game. But I think you just can't rely on hoping that Marc makes a mistake and then comes to you that way. That's the wrong way of going about it, I think.
Well, if Marc's fast at 18 circuits and you're fast at the other 4, that's not going to win you the championship.
No, absolutely, you're right.
You know, that's we can, you know, people know, well, the great circuits come up for Pecco. Fine, but they're not exactly bad circuits for Marc either, so
I don't think Marc Marquez has a bad circuit, apart from what he says is Malaysia, and where else is bad for him? Catalonia. Yeah, he does it like there, a part of it, and you look at his record, like, and you still won like 4 races around each, so it's like, yeah, it's like, that I don't agree with Marc. I think he's got a good circuit everywhere, and yeah, let's see what happens. I think there's been a lot of talk, obviously, about Alex Marquez and how he's went this year, Pete. I think it's a situation where he just kind of approaches it like Argentina, isn't it? It's momentum, and he has that. He can just roll out in FP1 and just go, right, there's the setup, there's last year's data from everyone, let's go. It's really that simple, isn't it? Well, it sounds simple when you say it.
That's it. Keep doing what you're doing. Whatever it is that he's doing, keep doing it. Don't change anything. You know, whatever he's having for breakfast, eat the same thing for breakfast, because it's just going perfectly, isn't it? Really. I mean, looking back, probably, what was it, before Digia stepped out of last year's championship with his injury, I think Alex was the last of the Ducatis in the standings. I think he was about 12th or something, you know, and he had a good Sepang and moved up a bit, but, you know, obviously Digia stepped out, so, you know, he went backwards in the points, but, you know, the transformation from somebody who was 8th of the Ducatis last year and is now pressing Marc Marquez, his brother, you know, and taking the fight to him in just a few short months. It's been incredible. So yeah, whatever he's doing, whatever his team are doing, just do it all exactly the same. And also, you know, kind of the reverse of Pecco's situation. Know that there will be times when it won't go as well, but just accept that. Just accept that. Look at the big picture. Things are going better than anyone could have dreamed for Alex and Grassini this year. Just keep it going. You know, use that situation, the kind of the Jorge Martin situation of previous years where you're not in the factory team, you don't have that pressure. Don't get sucked into believing that you should be fighting for first place in every session, and just enjoy having really the best time of his career at the moment, isn't it? It's such a mental thing, isn't it, racing? And, you know, that motivation that he must have, the whole team must have after all those difficult years that he's had in the past. You know, now's the time to enjoy it. And, yeah, you know, as you say, you know, if he's got that setup that prefers flowing corners, things like that, okay, there's a few hard braking points at COTA, obviously, but there's an awful lot of corners. He's probably got the most corners of any track on the calendar, I would imagine, isn't it? So let's see. You know, I wouldn't rule anything out for Alex this weekend, the way that he's been riding in these opening 2 rounds. So, yeah, I would just, whatever it is he's doing, just keep doing it.
Yeah, Alex, I doubt you're listening, but that's the advice. Just keep going as you're going. Keep eating the same breakfast and everything. Yeah, I think it'll be interesting for me, because I think that his practice record has been outstanding this year. I had to look back and it was like, geez, he's been like 3rd, and like that's his lowest position in practice, even 3rd, and then all the rest has been 2nd or 1st. And you're thinking, that's just confidence. So it is from pre-season, even from Barcelona last year, from that test. It's just confidence, and it's so good to see what it can do to a rider who is talented and people have doubted, and look what you can do. It's impressive, isn't it, Lewis? What a little bit of just good feeling can do for someone.
Yeah, and I think we kind of all sort of Grassini a bit of an apology because once Mark left, we were kind of like, well, Alex Marquez, Fairman Aldeguer, it's not a great lineup when you compare to some of the other lineups on the grid. And that was kind of not really a disrespect certainly for Alex Marquez. We know what he can do in that bike, but to this point, he hasn't really consistently been able to show that he can fight for race wins. He hasn't really even been able to show he can fight for race wins. He did it in Aragon in his rookie season, but that was such an odd season.
Yeah,
that a lot of what we saw is quite hard to read into. But yeah, they've just hit the ground running, and I think that works for that team. That confidence thing. They know they're a small outfit. They don't have the full factory support from Ducati. Ducati puts engineers in the garage, and Gigi listens to them a lot. They're a very valued member of that Ducati stable, but obviously it's VR46 with the factory kind of element to it. But the one thing that Ducati's always been good at, to its credit, is always when there has been a quick rider within its stable, they have always then pushed to make sure that rider stays quick. And you have to think if that continues for Alex Marquez, they will start looking at, when we get to the rest test the 2025 chassis that we parked. It apparently worked very, very well in that particular spec of bike. Maybe it's something that can help him. Try the new aero. Why not give it to them? Because they're in a position where Ducati aren't going to be caught this year by any of the rivals. I mean, let's face it, Aprilia will be able to get in there and in amongst the podium battle at some point, but it's not going to be right now. KTM, don't see winning a Grand Prix this year, even with Pedro Acosta now, just how bad that bike is.
Yeah.
Honda and Yamaha are quite special cases as well, because they're removing goalposts because they can do more development over the year, and but by the point that if either of them can get to a point where they can consistently fight for race wins, they're going to be well out of the championship battle. So Ducati are in quite a luxurious position where, why not give new parts to Alex Marquez? Why not why not give new parts? Franco Morbidelli keeps doing what he's doing. Why not give new parts to them? Why not, throw a new chassis, new aero, that type of thing? Why not help boost them up further and strengthen that top five? Because ultimately, Ducati wants a manufacturers' championship, and the best way to do that is to make sure you've got the strongest stable there. Obviously they can rely on Marc Marquez quite a lot, but mechanical dramas happen, crashes happen. We've seen that. You need to make sure that you've got then enough riders there to be able to pick up the pieces, which Alex Marquez is in the prime position to do that right now. But equally, if you get into a point where you're guaranteed to win the championship, why not? And Alex Marquez is still thereabouts around Mark. If one of the other riders thereabouts at the front of the championship, why not help them, have that championship battle? Why not? We saw last year Ducati were quite good about, okay, we're going to pause development for both riders, for both Bagnaia and Martin. We want a fair championship fight, despite all the talk of and all the worries and even Martin's worries that as soon as he signed for Aprilia, that was going to be it for the support. Ducati actually went in the other direction. We're like, well, okay, well, we have this new chassis. Pecco likes it a lot. We could give it to him, and that could make the difference maker. But they were like, well, we want an even fight. You've both earned it to be here, so let's do that. And so I think, Ducati are in that position, and I think Grassini have kind of very much put themselves in that position where if they keep doing what they're doing, and Alex Marquez keeps doing what they're doing, then Ducati can't really ignore them and say, well, you don't deserve any new parts. They'll be like, well, you've earned them, so here, have them, test them. If you like them, race them. We'll build more spares, And I think from Ducati's point of view, having a Marquez 1-2, most weekends up there is good for PR. It looks good for them, to have the two of them, because the two of them train together, the two of them, they do all those sorts of things. So if you've got that as your marketing tool, that's also a very good thing. So there's a lot of real benefits for Ducati to have Alex Marquez up there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's see what happens with the whole of the Ducati lineup this weekend. Who knows, GP24 could be even the bike to beat. Imagine that. Imagine the 24 of Morbidelli and Alex Marquez and Aldeguer to an extent. Imagine they surprised and they showed the strengths of that year-old bike. But we'll see. Aprilia update, Pete. Jorge Martin not going to be here. hopeful. He put a video out on social media. He's hopeful that he could get to Qatar. But there's obviously all this. We kind of touched on it. This testing rule that gets brought up, and there's some that are opposing it. Jack Miller has some really good quotes on it. I think it's if you want to read that, head across to our website. They're really good. What do you think for Aprilia and Martin's sake? Do you think it's a good circuit for them, as we touched on at the start? But he is going to be sitting at home going, oh, geez, I wish I was there. That's the only bike that won that wasn't a Ducati last year, and it's at this circuit. I think it's tough for him, isn't it?
Yeah, this is going to be a really painful one to miss, isn't it? For exactly that reason, as you say, the bike went so well at COTA last year that it's the one place that Martin would have thought, I want to get on the Aprilia and see what it's like to ride around there. And unfortunately, he's going to miss that chance, as you say. We assume that Lorenzo Savadori will be fit. He obviously missed the race in Argentina, injured his shoulder, didn't he? In a sort of an incident. He didn't actually crash, I don't think, but injured his shoulder, so they're hoping that he'll be able at least to stand in again. And as you say, Martin sounds like we'll try and go for Qatar. We haven't heard anything more, have we, about whether this test will happen, whether they'll get agreement for the MotoGP test before it. Meeting, was it Thursday at COTA maybe? Yeah, seems a bit unlikely. They'll need it to be unanimous to get it through. Among the manufacturers, that is. It's not each individual team, just the factories, so 5 of them. Don't know. Yeah, mid-season rule changes are always something that they try and avoid. It's okay if we change the rules, we do it from the start of the season so that everyone knows where they stand. So it is something that they normally don't do unless it's on safety grounds. And of course, you can make a bit of an argument about safety grounds here, but we've seen in the past riders miss a lot of races. You can do a superbike test. Okay, it's not the same. But if you ride a superbike all day, you're going to get an idea of your physical strength, aren't you?
Yeah.
Okay, not the absolute extreme forces, but the idea that if you rode a superbike all day, you would then go to a Grand Prix and suddenly find you can't ride the MotoGP bike. I don't think there's been any examples of that happening that I can think of anyway. We've seen guys, going back to Rossi, when he broke his leg and missed races, he did a superbike test, didn't he, before he came back. And that worked pretty well for him. He was, I feel okay, and then he was able to ride the Grand Prix bike. So yeah, it's you can understand that the situations are in. It's not just a rider missing races; it's a rider that's missed all of testing and is completely new to their bike. So it's a shame for them. Obviously, if it was a Yamaha or Honda rider, they could do a private test anyway because of concessions. So I suppose that's the complication as well with changing the rule. You're basically changing the concession rules, aren't you? As they stand, and saying that okay, if you're in Band D, you can do private testing. Oh, but also if you're injured, you can. So it starts getting really complicated. What sounds like a really simple and logical thing to do suddenly becomes quite complicated. So I don't know. I'm not sure they'll get this test, to be quite honest. Let's see. Maybe they'll all agree to it. But either way, let's hope that Martin comes back for Qatar, as you say, and then really that'll just be an extended test, won't it? And then go to Jerez and have the Jerez test, and then probably after the Jerez test, that's when hopefully you'll have at least a setup on the bike. Yeah. But until then, as you say, COTA, it's a great chance to at least go there if you're Aprilia and know you have a bike that was so good last year. I'm sure they've all been poring over the data. How did Maverick ride? What was his setup, as I say? The tyre choices, I don't think, in the previous rounds, Argentina was missing, but they haven't made big changes tyre selection-wise this year, so probably most things will be equal. So there will be, a decent setup they can start with that worked last year, and let's see who it suits. As I say, you never know. You never know. Someone might jump on a Vinales setup and blow everyone away. Who knows? We did see a bit of tyre variation in the race last year, didn't we? A few different choices on the podium.
Yeah.
So
Maverick
again,
went
that
for
could come into it.
What was it? Did Maverick go softer? I think, didn't he?
I think so. Yeah.
I think that was.
I think he might have. Yeah, I know there was. Yeah, both types of rear tyre got onto the podium, so there were different ways of going about it. Yeah, I think you could use the medium or the soft. So again, that's a good sign. It shows that the choice is pretty open, as we saw really in Argentina in the race, wasn't it? Again, we saw the VR46 guys on the soft tyre get in there as well. So maybe people can take some tyre gambles this weekend and shake things up again. Again, maybe another option for Pecco to try and find something against these Marquez brothers. But and also for the other manufacturers, you've got nothing to lose if you're in a situation where there's one guy on one bike that's looking like they're going to dominate. why not roll the dice and see if you can go in a different direction and it will pay off? It's that kind of track, isn't it? They have so little knowledge of COTA that really there is a chance for somebody to make a big step and for there to be surprises. So it should be an interesting one, I think.
Yeah, and while on the subject of the track, I don't know if it's been resurfaced in any places, but COTA always seems to have little bits here and there that have done. If you remember back a few years ago, the bumps, oh my God, it was like a motocross track. So it was, and the only two riders that didn't complain, I think it was Jack Miller and Marc Marquez. They didn't really mind it, but like it was sketchy watching through. I think it was turn 2 at the bottom of the hill and then round the backside of the track. Yeah, it's a real testing circuit for the riders, and like I say, Jorge Martin probably sitting gutted in the house, realizing that could have had a chance here, but I would not want to be coming back at Texas. It is probably one of the most physical circuits of the year. Yeah, I think it's best to sit that one out and come back when you're ready. But other than that, gents, prediction time. I mean, it'll probably be pretty quick here. I'm gonna go Marc Marquez for the double. I don't think it will be. Actually, I don't know. We've seen pretty close battles this year. Well, not close on the timesheets with him and his brother. I think he might just pull the pin here and go, yeah, that's just stretch our legs a bit and see what we can do and kind of run everyone into the ground. Lewis, that's your prediction's going to be? Is it Mark?
Yeah, I don't see any change amongst the top two this weekend. Third place would be an interesting one. Morbidelli would be interesting to see if he can keep that pace up from Argentina. Digi is coming on strong.
Yep.
Pecco will be thereabouts in that podium battle, you'd hope, but he doesn't have a brilliant record in COTA. Hondas, I'm looking forward to seeing what the Hondas can do. This was a racetrack they won on just a couple of years ago with Alex Rins, and what proved to be a one-off for them, but the layout of the track seems to suit the kind of that Honda's a very agile bike, and yes, it doesn't have the horsepower, but through those kind of those twistier sections and the agility of it seems to be that it can then get out of the corners a bit better than maybe it would do normally. So yeah, given what we saw in Argentina, I'm curious to see if that kind of carries on. So yeah, whether that's Zarco, whether it's maybe one of the factory bikes, I'd like to see Joan Mir step up a bit more. So yeah, I think that battle for third will be fun.
Yeah, Pete, what's your take on the podium for the week?
Yeah, same as you two boys. I think Marquez brothers 1 and 2. It's hard to see beyond that at the moment, barring a surprise. And yeah, I think third place. I think that could be where the action is, as you guys have been saying. And let maybe another manufacturer could get up on the podium. It's going to be hard though with all those Ducatis, isn't it? Acosta went well last year, but as we've been saying, it's a track where tyre wear can be an issue. We saw Bastianini do his usual magic to win a couple of years back, which sort of underlined that. And the KTM is struggling with tyre wear already, on normal tracks, shall we say. So they could be in for a long weekend there. The Yamaha, they're struggling for grip, aren't they, still? And it's a low grip sort of track. Maybe someone like Jack Miller who sort of excels in low grip and can sort of rise above the machine a bit, but it's hard to see how you can then take that towards being a podium fight. I think he could be the top Yamaha this weekend, but where exactly that'll be, I don't know. But I think, Ducati's at the front, it looks like, doesn't it? Barring, as I say, who knows, from something magical from Aprilia and maybe Zarco or Mir. They both look fired up at the moment, don't they? And
absolutely,
as you guys say, they're going to suffer in the race. But if they can qualify well and just cling on, who knows what they can do? So let's see what happens.
Yeah, and just a bit of housekeeping. Miguel Oliveira is out. He will be replaced by Augusto Fernandez, who was supposed to be replacing the injured Jonathan Ray on World Superbike, but then he's got called up to do the MotoGP job. So I think, that'll be. I think that's the only change apart from Salvadori, as you mentioned, Pete. He probably will be there, but like I say, just the one rider change for the grid, and that's pretty much it. We'll have a review of the Grand Prix on Monday. If you're going to watch on YouTube, why not hit that subscribe button and tell us your predictions for the weekend ahead. If you're listening on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, hit the little bell icon to be notified for every episode, and a 5-star review would be appreciated as well. Well, until next time, take care, and we'll see you then.